Okay, so here we are. Welcome and good evening to all of you. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope that all of you can hear me if you are in the audience. If you're not part of the screen, we're going to give you an opportunity to join us a little later on for the second half of the broadcast. So,
welcome and good evening to all of you. Thank you so much.
I don't know what that feedback is. Uh-oh. Problems. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start reading my script, and then we're going to go forward with the program. Once we get through the question and answer, once we get to the question and answer session, I will ask group one, that's qualified immunity with Andre, and then we're going to go to citizen engagement, and then that's going to be after that we're going to go to equity for group three, and then we'll do a session break for about 2 minutes, and then we will come back, and then we will do the general sessions and end in 1 hour. So without further ado, let me read my little script here. So good evening, scholars, and welcome to everyone joining us for this screencast. I'm Dr. Jane Cubbage, along with scholars from my organizational communication course, 538, research and meta-analysis, research writing and meta-analysis, within the graduate program in the organizational communication program at Bowie State University. Bowie State University is located halfway between Washington, D.C., which is the nation's capital, and the capital of the state of Maryland in Annapolis. And Bowie State has the distinction of being the oldest and longest serving HBCU in the state of Maryland. So by way of overview, our 1 hour live session today will be delivered in 2 parts. Part 1, where selected scholars from each group will answer a series of questions about their research findings on topics of qualified immunity, citizen engagement, and equity. After our first session, we will take a quick session break and resume with part 2 of our discussion, where a second set of scholars will join our session and answer general questions about the assignment and what they learned in the process before we conclude. This session is being streamed on StreamYard and shown live on YouTube with an enabled chat and discussion feature. Please be respectful in posing comments and questions to our scholars. Once again, thank you to everyone for joining us this evening. So by way of history for this assignment that we're talking about, today's discussion is a culmination of an assignment within the course of ORGC 538, where scholars explore the concept of community-oriented policing as an alternative policing strategy, which seeks to foster relationships and joint responsibility between law enforcement and members of a particular community with high police activity and fractured community relationships. This topic was explored via meta-analysis, which is a quantitative research method that analyzes phenomenology using statistical results from several existing research studies to determine a cumulative summary and findings on a particular subject. For our course this semester, fall 2020, which was held virtually, we examined an article written by Gill et al. 2014, which was titled Community-Oriented Policing to Reduce Crime, Disorder, and Fear, and Increase Satisfaction and Legitimacy Among Citizens, a Systematic Review. And this article was published in the Journal of Experimental Criminology. The article examined the effectiveness of community-oriented policing in the wake of police killings of unarmed citizens in the United States, and the effectiveness of this policing strategy was weighed. The article found that while community-oriented policing was effective in leveling out hostilities between police and marginalized communities, it had no significant impact on the reduction of crime when employed as a policing strategy. The researchers also found that there is an issue of police legitimacy, meaning an overall questioning of police authority, particularly in the case of police brutality. After reading this article, which was designed to impart the mechanics and structure of a research study using the meta-analysis as a method, we wanted to explore this topic more deeply. Accordingly, scholars were assigned to several groups which focused on topics such as qualified immunity, citizen engagement, and equity in the manner in which the exploration of such topics can lead to solutions to the ongoing challenge of police brutality and the continued killings of unarmed Black men and women in the United States today. Also, as we know, this year, 2020, has been particularly jarring in the wake of protests over the deaths of many of those whose names we know and are made aware of, and the countless others who receive no attention at all. This assignment is the culmination of years of exploring the topic of policing and police brutality in the United States, historically and in recent years, following the frenzied media coverage of the deaths of unarmed Black men and women at the hands of law enforcement officers. So, without further ado, our session tonight is a roundtable discussion whereby members of each group will discuss their assigned topic as it relates to community-oriented policing as a solution to the ongoing issue of police brutality in the United States. Joining me today are the scholars from Organizational Communication 538, Introduction to Research, Writing, and Meta-Analysis, representing their various groups. Group 1 consists of Andre Howard, who is joining us here today, and also Autumn Fletcher, who is not here. Don't see her, but yes, she's part of the group and did the research as well. So from Group 2, who will explore citizen engagement, we are joined by Dakota Budhu, and let's see who else is here. Dakota, and we have Morgan Rahman. The other members of the group are also joining us via stream is Mohammed Al-Dosari and Khalid Al-Harbi, and Daniel Gibson was also part of the group but unable to join us today. And then finally, Group 3 is speaking on the topic of equity as it relates to social justice, police brutality, and community-oriented policing, as the other groups are all interfacing with these topics as well. And here with us today, we have Priscilla Cotton, Deanne Vaughn, along with Taylor Spite. Thank you all for joining us. And if you're joining us from YouTube, also thank you and welcome. So the first question posed to Group 1 about qualified immunity. In fact, we're going to ask you about 4 questions, so I hope you've had a chance to look them over. And all of you, please feel free to chime in, and the others may also pose their comments and questions in the chat as they wish. So again, Group 1, qualified immunity. Explain to the audience what qualified immunity is and how it works.
All right, well, thank you for this opportunity to talk about this subject. So for qualified immunity, what I researched and I found was it is a principle that grants government officials performing discretionary functions immunity from civil suits unless the plaintiff shows that the official violated clearly established statutory or constitutional rights of which a reasonable person would have known. And so in this case, what it is a form of sovereign immunity, but is not as, is less strict than absolute immunity.
Understood. Is there more?
Yes, okay, so I can go on. So what it does is it keeps government officials from being personally liable for infringement of the Constitution. And so what it is if there is a form of ambiguity in the constitutional doctrine, it will absolve that government official if they have committed something that is not clearly stated there. And so that is the gist of qualified immunity. Is a form of sovereign immunity, but not necessarily absolute immunity.
Okay. So we know by the law that essentially in most legal cases, the litmus is whether or not a person's, I guess, their rights have been violated. And with qualified immunity, it says that certain individuals who fall under the umbrella of this particular statute or law, they are exempt from recognizing and respecting or having to honor the rights of individual human rights in the instance of law enforcement cases or in other instances.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That's good. So question 2, because we want to explore this even more deeply. In relation to our topic on community-oriented policing, how can qualified immunity be an impediment to ending police brutality? What did your research uncover?
Yes. So you started to talk about this a little bit. And what it does is it in a sense absolves the police officer of any form of responsibility and interactions that may include infringement of people's rights and even death in certain circumstances. And as we've seen lately, a few of those cases have resulted in death. And so what happens is those officers who are a part of that are not responsible for those actions. And so it impedes it, because when there's no justice, then it continues to happen. And so when you look at the part of the family who have lost a loved one, or the person whose rights has been infringed upon, they're unable to get justice because of this qualified immunity.
Mm-hmm. Excellent, excellent. Wonderful, wonderful. So question 3, in your research, you discussed 2 kinds of liability, personal and financial. And this is sort of dovetails off the earlier part of what you were talking about the actual justice, because we know that many families receive monetary compensation, but they don't get that justice in the courts where there's a sentence. So 2 kinds of liability, personal and financial, associated with police brutality. Discuss with our audience, if you will, the legal cases and their outcomes that explore these concepts more broadly. Like, what are the cases saying about these instances?
Of course. So with one of the most recent cases, Breonna Taylor, a case that we're all familiar with, we know that in that case, there were a few officers who were charged, but they were not charged with anything directly involved with the killing of Breonna Taylor. However, her family was awarded $12 million from the city. Now, we know that money is not money from the police force. It is not money strictly from the government, but those are taxpayer dollars. And so because of that, what you have is the financial responsibility or obligation is being met from those living in the city or in the state. And so they're paying out for the injustices or the wrongful infringement of people's rights and the constitutional, constitutional infringement, I guess. And so the people are paying for that, but the officers who are directly involved are not. They're not being indicted and they're not being charged. And we see that with almost every case that has involved a form of police brutality, where the families get a nice large lump sum of money. However, there's no justice at the end of the day for the killing of unarmed Black people.
Wonderful, wonderful. Again, it's sort of, if you ask a family who lost a loved one, would they want, more than likely they'd want justice, even above the payout, because we know that life is priceless. And so that's sort of the place where people are left to sort of say, well, here's money, but that doesn't salve the pain of having lost a loved one. Okay, so the final question, and this is very good. Also, in your findings, you write of the challenge of this legal statute or law, qualified immunity, and how it poses in the process of obtaining justice for the unarmed killings of Black people in the United States. What solutions do you pose to begin the process of resolving this issue?
Yes, so that was something that me and my partner Autumn had talked about. And honestly, the only solution that we were able to come up with is totally doing away with it, especially in the case of police officers. We often hear growing up, especially being a Black man, and I'm sure Black women as well, ignorance of the law is no excuse. And so if we're then putting that same mindset or that same standard on people, that them not knowing the law is no excuse, I think that should be the same case for the police officers. I know we talked about the forms of ambiguity in the constitutional doctrine, but the fact is, when somebody is unarmed, unable to defend themselves, and they are now killed or they're dead now, there is no ambiguity. It is straight-laced. It is a known fact, and there should be justice. And so that was our main takeaway, is that in this case is not doing any good. We don't see no good coming from this. But the only thing that we do find is the continual repetition of Black lives and their rights being taken away.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful, wonderful. And the law to solve the problem. I see that. I see that as being a viable solution. Thank you so much. Now we're going to move to group 2, and we have Morgan and Dakota joining us. And they are going to talk with us and share and explore their findings via research about citizen engagement. Welcome, Dakota and Morgan. The first question is, tell us, what is citizen engagement and how is it defined and how does it work in relation to community-oriented policing?
Thank you for this opportunity, Dr. Cubbage. Good evening, everybody. Citizen engagement is the process of enabling citizens and communities the right to participate in policing at their chosen level. The level of engagement ranges from providing information and assurance to empowering them to identify and implement solutions to local problems and influence strategic priorities and decisions. It's important as it allows the government to attain improved development results by establishing links between public service delivery, governance, empowerment, social inclusion, and citizen engagement. In relation to community-oriented policing, this is the meat that involves getting the community in talks directly with the police in their communities that they're policing.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. So it basically fosters more involved interaction between communities and law enforcement officials. It sort of helps everyone, sort of pulls everyone into a situation where everybody is equal shareholder and stakeholder to foster increased cohesiveness, essentially.
Yes, a decent relationship. Trying to build trust between the two.
Wonderful. So in your report in this topic, you mentioned key statistics on the impact of police brutality on those who are classified or called Black or African American. Specifically, you all talk about health outcomes. Explore this topic further. Exactly how does police brutality impact one's health?
Yeah, especially in 2020, you're seeing it, Morgan.
Morgan, did you want to?
Oh, yeah, sure. I'll jump in on that.
Okay.
So I feel like this connects to a lot of mental health issues, especially in Black men. Going through a traumatic situation like police brutality can really affect the way that you see the world and the way that you see yourself, basically. Like, I have a lot of Black male friends that they don't really talk about a lot of things that affects them mentally, but a lot of people seek therapy when they go through things like that, you know, feeling inadequate. So I definitely feel like it takes a toll on mental health.
Wow. Very good. Very good. Are there any other health outcomes that you want to explore, Dakota?
We researched and we found like a lot of Black people have high blood pressure due to the stress of the policing and the physical violence. Yeah. Especially after the death of Freddie Gray in 2015 in Baltimore, the city that we live in, and other various cities. Like when you have cases like that, it calls, and Black African Americans and people who identify as African American and people of color, they are known to have high blood pressure issues and cholesterol issues and heart issues. And the stress of the police and the bad policing that they experience is really taking a toll out of the people.
Mm-hmm. Yes, indeed. So here's the thing also you explored, and I thought this was very fascinating. You provided in your summary of the topic of citizen engagement some studies that talked about Black youth and their experiences in what is known as public spaces. Talk to us more about that, if you will. Tell us what your research found.
So in our research, we researched the city of Baltimore and the city of Chicago. Okay. The youth are being targeted because in citizen engagement, it's slowly becoming a white safe space where in the inner cities, a lot of the communities are experiencing gentrification. And the young Black youth used to explore like certain parks that the white community members have now taken over, converted into dog parks. So there's almost kind of a battle between the two cultures. And they don't understand the Black culture and certain activities that Black youth participate in, like, what do they call it? It's not beatboxing, but
breakdancing? Like,
Morgan, do you know what it's called?
Describe it.
With the youth activities that young African Americans do within our inner cities, freestyling.
Yes.
That's what I meant. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. So a lot of freestyling. It involves like a lot of profanity, and the white community members don't really understand what's going on.
Yeah.
So the first thing they do is call 311, because when they go to the community citizen engagement groups and meetings, that's the number that the police give them, and they feel like it's a number where they can just report anything that they see the Black youth doing. They just call 311 immediately, and Black youth no longer feel wanted in their known spaces that they always have felt comfortable in.
So this is creating sort of a polarization between existing people and then people who are moving in, when in fact civic engagement was designed to sort of do the opposite and sort of create more cohesion in the community. That's telling. How do you see this as, kind of being worked through and employed effectively, so that one, I guess there is more cohesion, and ultimately that there's fewer police brutality? Because if people are calling 311, that's going to generate not necessarily 911, but it's going to generate possibly a police response, depending on what the local ordinances are surrounding loitering and just suspicious activity, if you will. So how do we use this? How do we use civic engagement so that it's doing what it intends to do and not creating more polarization?
It's about building the trust between the Black community and the police. The community liaisons that the Baltimore Police Department specifically has are majority white.
Yes.
So what Baltimore, I feel like they should do is involve more community liaisons of color, people who look like the community, like the Black community specifically, because Black people feel comfortable talking to Black people. It's just like a human nature. We all gravitate towards likeness, what we're used to.
Yes.
And if they have more people that look like them, I feel like that'll build trust in the community. And having a Black person as a community liaison that understands what's going on in the communities, I feel like they'll know like they're not fighting, they're just freestyling because they know what's going on in the community. It's important.
Yeah, that makes sense. When you say that Baltimore can employ more people as people who are Black as community liaisons, how would they go about doing that? I mean, you posted a link to their page. I can post this also in the chat. But how does that happen? Like, why is it that it's not occurring to them? Or do we know what the percentages and the racial breakdowns are of the community liaisons? Any idea?
So ex-cons, for example, in Baltimore,
Yes.
Sheila Dixon created an initiative and where it was kind of like a community engagement activity, which brought ex-offenders and the youth together.
Okay.
For different activities and community and citizen engagement, and that worked. After Sheila Dixon left office, the city stopped that program, but it did prove that when people, ex-cons, for example, that wanted to do better for their community, and ex-offenders like gangs, like they wanted, it's kind of like the Boys and Girls program, or like Little Brother, Little Sister.
Sure.
Where they wanted to inform the younger community that we did it this way, your generation's up next, don't make the same mistakes that we made.
Yeah.
And I feel like the police should reach out to those groups more, like in the city specifically. Yeah. They're not currently, I don't know why not, but I know like different organizations are trying to work with the incoming mayor, Brandon Scott, to try to fix that program, bring it back.
Yeah. Now, remember when we watched, we had a watch party earlier in the semester, and we watched the PBS Frontline series, Policing the Policed. And we watched I had you all preview the first episode that aired in 2015, and then we watched the updated episode of 2020 titled "Policing the Police Part 2." And recall in that episode that there was something from the mayor of Newark who employed community groups, and you could see people who were going around, and they were citizens or civilian. I forget what they called them, but they went around and they actually helped sort of mitigate and diffuse potential issues and hotspots in the community without engaging the police. And that's something that could possibly be implemented and replicated in other cities, particularly Baltimore and Chicago. And it would sort of diffuse the schisms that exist between people coming in and the people who have been in these communities for a number of years. And so I hope that kind of gets out to the officials who are making these decisions.
They also started a cease the fire movement. Like the Baltimore churches are really influential in the community.
Okay.
And really powerful to see them come together to like try to stop the violence in the streets.
Excellent. That's wonderful. That's great. Excellent, excellent, excellent. We will, on the second part of this discussion, talk about how to implement these good ideas and how do we get outside of talking about it on this platform and actually implementing them nationwide wherever there are quote unquote hotspots that exist in our communities. So thank you very much, Dakota and Morgan, for your input and for your discussion and telling of your research. We appreciate that. Now, group 3 is equity. And joining us to talk about equity is Deanne and Priscilla, Deanne Vaughn and Priscilla Cotton. Thank you, ladies, for joining us. So I'm going to fire off the first question about equity first. What is equity, I guess, as opposed to equality? And then how is it defined and related to our topic, community-oriented policing?
Yes. So thank you, Dr. Cubbage, for having us. So equity is the quality of being fair and being impartial. And that can relate to resources, education. So related specifically to community-oriented policing, police officers should be required to be fair and impartial because the targeting towards Black men and women have not been fair and impartial. And you mentioned the video that we watched earlier this semester about policing the police. Those police officers, when interviewed, they were saying how they have just this kind of gut feeling or this kind of, I can tell by the way that they're expressing or the way that they're moving or the way that they're walking. Like that's completely not impartial at all. And it was very, very obviously targeted towards Black Americans.
Yes. So in this case, equity would be leaving the presumed presumption of innocence for everyone, regardless of how they appear or that they seem, or that they seem like they're suspicious or that their hands are in their pocket, as was outlined in the segment, right. And that everyone sort of gets that unless there is a call for a suspect, and so that people are left alone to be able to go about their life without suspicion, and that's equally and equitably applied across the board. That's a good example. Excellent. Deanne, did you want to add to that? Okay.
I think Priscilla hit it
Good. Okay. So for question 2 related to equity, in your report on this topic, you mentioned key statistics on the impact of police brutality on those who are Black or African American classified. And specifically, you discussed health outcomes. Also, you talk about health outcomes. Explore that further and talk about how police brutality, how does it impact one's health?
So like Morgan stated earlier, police brutality really affects the mental health. And I don't think people understand how internally going through a traumatic process like that can affect you. So personally, in my own personal experience, I have brothers, all brothers, and they've had to go through police brutality since have been a child. And then it wasn't until I got above age where my significant other had a very traumatic, situation with the police, and I watched how it caused depression. I watched how it caused him to shake in his sleep. And I think that a lot of people don't understand that, the violent encounters with the police, that issues stress, and that can have a very negative effect on your mental and physical health. And also that, just the fact that African Americans are being killed at the hands of police, this causes so many health issues just among Black Americans as a whole. Just to see your family, your friends to go through that, it's very traumatic. And unfortunately, it's just something that, Black depression and stress is already a common factor in the Black community as a whole.
Yes.
So with that already being a factor, having the feeling of being isolated and the feeling of being harmed by your police, that just puts another stress on top of stress. And it definitely has a major effect on your mental health.
Yeah, it's like a stress that's compounded.
Mhm.
Like you said, excellently worded, because stress on top of stress. And then there should be little to no surprise if there's distrust or mistrust of law enforcement officers after these things occur, particularly when one is innocent. It's one thing if I'm not saying, everyone deserves to get treated like this, but if you're going about your life and these things are occurring because of kinds of laws like stop and frisk or just, search and seizure laws, then.
Exactly. I actually want to say an example, if I can, it's because of that. So even I'll put it out there. My significant other at his job or his former job, he was a supervisor, and they made a lot of tips. They detailed cars, and it was the police officer stopped him because he drove a nice car. And when they search a car without any warrants or anything, they just pull you over because you look different. You have locks, you have something that looks different, and just because he had money in the car, for them it's like, oh, drugs or this. Why is that the first thing that and that does a lot for the Black man. That makes them think like, you're categorizing me, you don't even know me. Little do you know, this has nothing to do with drugs. I'm a hardworking Black man. But the first thing you're going to think is something negative.
Yes.
And that really affects, I feel like mental health is so important for the Black man, and because they're not going to discuss it, but us as Black women, we see it.
Yes.
And the police, they're doing a really terrible job as far as when it comes to Black community mental health. But that's what equity and policing enforcement is for. So
yeah. This profiling is what it is. I see you fit the profile. I'm going to stop you no matter what's happening, again, without the presumption of innocence. It's just unfortunate because it's rampant all over the country, and it's happening on a day-to-day basis. And so that's one thing. One of the reasons why we find it important to talk about things like equity. So your work also, this is for both of you, provides an historical overview of migratory patterns of African Americans and their arrival to large urban centers, and in the manner in which the increase of police misconduct was normalized during that time in some respects. Tell us more about this correlation.
Yes, absolutely. So this directly correlates to the Great Migration, when Black people moved to these high populated cities, looking for positive experiences, more employment, and from the increase of the amount of Black people in these cities, that increased and I put this in quotes, security that was in place in these urban centers. And that created this cycle of gentrification, which pushed white people into more of the urban suburban areas. And then that's removing money from these communities, from our communities. And then from taking money out of those communities, then that's leaving our community significantly more vulnerable to police brutality, which then, if money is not there, then therefore that creates the lack of care, and then the explosion of these police brutality situations.
Yeah.
And it is definitely very, very popularized and normalized in urban situations and centers, because of the increase of
Racial polarization. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's a conflict between the two races. Now, first, people who are Black or so-called African American are leaving the South in those horrible conditions. Many were facing lynchings, murderings, being subject to sharecropping, and now they're going to the greener pastures in northern and western cities, larger urban centers, and then only there to come to find out that they are being harassed just the same by the police. That those same concepts, maybe not as horribly as they were experiencing in the South, but similar slum-like conditions, redlining, opposition, and then to wit, police brutality. And then those things are not necessarily tamped down by the local law enforcement officials. It's sort of just like, this is just the way it is, and this is the kind of treatment you're going to get. And that was the case in many of these urban centers. And that's, again, another unfortunate byproduct of racism and white supremacy in this country. So the last question I wanted to explore with you is explain to our audience the concept of equity and how it can be implemented in other areas of society to help resolve police brutality. How can we apply this? What can we do across the board to infuse more equity in our systems?
So I think me and Priscilla can kind of piggyback on that. I feel like equity is not just a category just for police brutality. So it should be implemented in education, housing, healthy food access, healthcare. Equity should be an ongoing process for citizens. It's needed in the communities. It's needed everywhere because we need some type of balance. And I feel like that's what equity is. It's a balance between all people.
Okay.
And I feel as though it's a positive outcome when you implement equity. I think nothing negative will come from it. So I feel like if more people just have that mindset of having equity, then there will be more positive outcomes.
Yes.
Absolutely. And just to add on, if one category, like they're all connected, like in the grand scheme of things, like if kids are being educated, then money is going to be focused on education. Then that money will also focus on their healthcare. Okay, then that healthcare will also go into, okay, if they're getting better education, they're getting more food. That access to food. Then, I mean, it's all correlated, and being treated better with health, food, education, then that lowers crimes as well. So like it all correlates, and that equity not being in place for our people is just doing this entire like spiral of like, oh no, like if it's not correlated, if it's not in this section, then we don't have to worry about all these other parts to it. But it's all correlated, and that is equity.
Very well stated. I think what we think is, particularly as our focus is on community-oriented policing and police brutality, we tend to think of these issues as singular and standalone, when in reality, they are very, very interfused. If we have quality education, healthcare, housing, and all of these other things, then things will take care of themselves. But as a result, these things are fractioned and they're economically deprived, as well as the people themselves. And so this is why you have this sort of snowball, if you will, of issues where it just mounds and mounds and grows larger and larger, rather than getting smaller. So that's very good. Let's see, it's about 8:32. We've got about 15 minutes remaining. I thought we were going to take a quick break, but we don't necessarily need to. What I'm going to do is just shuffle the participants. I'm going to push Morgan to the audience, and then Dakota to the audience. But unless you all want to stay, and then give, I think it's Taylor and Khalid, if you all would like to join us. Let's see, do I see two more people? I see Mohammed. His device is not connected. So I'm gonna bring Taylor up into the audience, from the audience. Hi, Taylor, how are you?
Hello, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. Welcome. And we're gonna just push through. I had some music and I was gonna do like a break, but we don't need to do all that because then we can just finish early. Hi, Dakota. Morgan, are you still here with us?
Yes, ma'am, I'm still here.
Oh, okay, good. Okay, so let me see. Is there someone else? I see Mohammed, and I see one other person who's on StreamYard. I don't know who this person is. Hi. Maybe put your name in the chat because I don't know. I don't see who you are. But what I want to do is just ask the final questions, and this will be more of like a round table, so you all can just answer, just jump in as you feel like you're able to. First, how has your perspective on these topics, community-oriented policing, qualified immunity, citizen engagement, and equity, changed or evolved since working on this assignment? Like, what did you gain from this?
I can start.
Okay.
So just analyzing all of the research and the perspectives of not only the police, but the community, there needs to be some acknowledgement on both sides that true equity and is needed in order for the community to flourish. Just going back to Black Lives Matter versus Blue Lives Matter. Blue is not a race. So the perception on Black and brown people is, okay, well, it's either my life or your life, because your rebuttal to me saying Black Lives Matter is Blue Lives Matter. So the police, in a sense, the perception can be, okay, well, I am inferior to you, and whatever you say goes. So there needs to be some type of community outreach or some mandatory thing that the police must do, like live in their communities to truly understand the people that they are policing and supposed to protect. And with that, there would definitely be a decrease in assaults and murders and just negative interactions overall.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that that's an important distinction. No one is suggesting that people don't care about law enforcement officers or that their lives don't matter. I know I certainly have members of the law enforcement community as family and friends, and respect the job that they do when they do it well. I think that it should be given that we are here to talk about the instances of police brutality and the senseless, unnecessary killing of unarmed people. And that's a distinction that does need to be addressed and addressed firmly, not only in our community, but society at large. So I agree with that discussion and the important distinction between the two. How about anybody else? How did this topic influence your perspective on any of these topics? How did this assignment influence?
Yes, I can jump in.
Sure.
I completely agree with Taylor. Before police come into the—
I have to get my adapter, but I'm listening. I can hear you.
Oh, sorry. There needs
Continue.
to be a build up first. There needs to be, like Taylor said, accountability. Acknowledge first that there's a problem, and then figure out what the community wants first. Don't just impose on that, because again, there's no trust between Black people and the police. And of course, trust has to be built. So I feel like before that happens, make town halls, figure out what people want to make them feel safe, and to have them feel like they can have your trustworthiness first. And then on our topic of citizen engagement, I feel like that will create more people wanting to actually engage, bring up topics that they feel like will help their community, and actually get people involved, because like a lot of Black people are not out just talking to the police. Like, sorry, but we don't do that. So again, there has to be trust built there. And I feel like that's going to take a lot of time. And like Taylor said, again, there needs to be accountability first.
Absolutely. Well said. Well stated. Absolutely. Absolutely. Anybody else want to weigh in on this topic, on this first question? How did this assignment impact you or change your viewpoint about any of these topics?
It gives me hope. They always say actions speak louder than words. And the fact that there are police departments and communities working together, trying to figure out a way to make things better.
Yes.
That gives me hope for the future. Like, I don't know if I'll see it in my lifetime, but hopefully we will.
You might.
Yeah, hopefully. And maybe in the next generations, the work that we're doing now will see an improvement in the future.
That's good. That's good. Wonderfully stated. Absolutely. Hope. Keep hope. Keep it alive. We have hope. We can do a lot with that. Yeah.
To piggyback off of what Dakota said, yes, hopefully, hopefully we will see it. But also I do hope that not only that we're implementing all this on our end, I hope that the police trying on their end as well, because it takes both parties. You know, we can have all the dots connected, we can have the structure of wanting to make a change, but even though we want to change, they might not. So it takes two parties. You know, it doesn't just take us, it takes them as well to hold some type of accountability so things can come together.
It takes two. Yes, absolutely. Very well stated. Definitely. Most definitely.
Yeah. And I mean, at least for me, I definitely, like, police brutality, I guess it was more so something that you just saw on the news, or, you know, just read about, but us doing this assignment and actually just researching and seeing that documentary, like, it's kind of brought more of a perspective of, okay, maybe there are things that can be done to create change in this. And I think I was more on the pessimistic side of this, but I definitely feel like there is hope, as it's already been stated, that there can be a possible change in communication and just like a space where that can be held to create that discussion between citizens and that in the police.
That's wonderful. I think that it's an important distinction for you to note, that there is the place where, you know, I'm just a regular citizen and I'm seeing this fed to me on the news versus let me delve deeply into this and see, one, what research says about it, and then two, what else I can possibly do about the situation, because we're all, as you also eloquently stated before, it takes two. So it doesn't just take the police to reform. It takes not only the people in the street who are being subject to this, but also to other people who say, you know what, this is not what we want to see. This is not what we consider to be a proper society. We don't do things this way. We consider ourselves more civil than this. And the discourse and the actions, even if it's punitive, needs to be more civil than what we're having right now. So I think that's a wonderful distinction, and a wonderful component that you've added to this. The second question leads exactly to this, from my last statement, and that is, how do you plan to engage others, such as police, government officials, policymakers, or even your friends and family, friends and family members regarding this topic? How do you intend to engage people surrounding this topic? What will you say to them about what you know and what you've uncovered in your research, and how will it affect basically how you act on these topics?
Me personally, I think it all starts in your community and your household. Well, your household first, then your community.
Yes.
You know, talk to your government officials if you can, your, you know, state attorneys, your whomever in your community, your executive people in your community, because it starts in the community. Although, yes, it's a broader subject, but you can implement this in your own community yourself. Although we can't talk about what's happening in, you know, other countries or other states, but here where we are, we can make things happen on our end within our own community and talk to who we can and put the word out there on our end. At least we'll be doing our part with putting the word out there.
Hello, that's good. That's good. How about
Absolutely.
others?
And to add on to that, you know, talking to our leaders in office, like, the worst that they can possibly say is no, right? So, you know, continue doing that. And at least for me, I mean, this, like what we're doing right now, this podcast, I mean, this is definitely now a talking point. Like, I can, you know, and I can express like, oh, okay, this is what I did in my class. This is what you can do in your possible communities. And at least for me, a lot of my friends are out of state. So this can definitely be created. And we can also create this within our own social media platforms. I mean, we all have Instagram. We all have Facebook. We have something. You got Gmail, YouTube. Like, we can have another virtual podcast, especially during these times of COVID. I mean, everything is virtual. So, I mean, it's not a huge jump to create a live discussion to have this as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think part of the need for the discussion is that people clearly have pent up feelings and emotions surrounding these topics, and also pent up ideas, because we all have what we think ought to happen in our minds. And then if we inform it with existing research or personal experiences, or experiences from people whom we know, our family members or associates, then this is an opportunity to sort of get it out there. Maybe there are possibly some people out there who have successfully addressed this topic in their community. We don't know where they are yet. And that would be important to bring into this conversation with regard to solutions. Who else has something to add about this question? How will you change? How will you go forth with this information? How will you talk to others about this?
I think just having more information and background research to communicate to others, we're able to communicate it in a more authentic, interpersonal way, because we're doing it to our peers and communicating it in a way that they will understand and be comfortable. Because, having it said by a teacher, for example, or some high figure in the community may not be perceived the same way as having your friend or your sister or your brother explain to you the extremities of the situation and what we can do locally to bring this to another level.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well stated. Well stated. Anything else to add to this particular question? No. Okay. So we have one final question, and that is, we've discussed some salient ideas here and during the course of the semester as it relates to police brutality and the shooting of unarmed Black men and women in the United States. And in addition to that, we've already discussed the implementations of these ideas, but give me 3 tangible ways that we can do? We kind of touched on it in the last question, but give me 3 tangible takeaways for the audience that you would all recommend that we do, just because we got to start somewhere. A start is a start. And I like to always say that the universe is waiting for us to make that first step. And once we make that first step, then the momentum field is actually with us, particularly as MLK stated that the moral pendulum or the moral arc of the universe, it swings wide, but it leans towards justice. And at the end of the day, that's what we're looking for. So we want to sort of be that groundswell of that first step, that spark, if you will. So give me three takeaways that we can engage with our community and even with law enforcement about this important topic.
I would say be the change you want to see, community outreach. Start within your community outreach programs, getting the word out there.
Good. Excellent.
One idea that I had based on what Priscilla recently said was having a Zoom setting such as this, and having community members come on and having police officers come on and just have an organic discussion. And it's virtual, so it's more comfortable, and they can be transparent about how they feel. And I think a lot can be solved just by having a comfortable conversation where it's moderated and everyone is able to share their perspectives.
Yes. Okay, and what's the third thing?
I have one. Reach out to your representatives. They're there to work for us. A lot of people forget that. These days, you can send them a DM in their Instagram. It's easy. You have a cell phone. You can email them on your cell phone. Yeah, it's very easy. Communities can come together, think of a plan that they want for their communities, get together. The more numbers you have, the better. And these politicians working for you. That's what they're here for. That's what they're supposed to do. It's time for them to do their jobs, and we need to hold them accountable.
Accountability. Yes. Is there more? I mean, I said 3, but is there one more that we can tweak in there to the list?
I can add something.
Okay.
I feel like social media is huge right now.
Okay.
If you, like Dakota said, if you kind of reach out and not through DMs, but kind of reach out publicly.
Okay.
a lot of people have kind of went viral for that, and I wouldn't suggest that being the first option. But if your voice isn't heard, a lot of people don't like to be put on the spot a lot of the time. But a lot of the time, that's how we get our answers. So I would say if a solution would be to kind of reach out to them on social media and get their attention first. So then changes can be made.
Good.
But not as the first option.
Yes. I like that. That solution reminds me of, thank you, Morgan, of if I'm in a place of business and I'm not happy with their response to my complaints, then the next thing I'm going to do is, you know what? I'm going on social media. I've had people stop on a dime. Oh, wait, don't do that. Because they know not only are they going to be put on blast, but that you cannot delete anything that's on social media. I screenshot that, even if the account's taken down and I screenshot it and people have reacted to it, it's out there in the virtual sphere and there's no way you can claw it back. So to your point, Morgan, you are apt in noting that it's sort of like, listen, I'm going to go to social media with this. I'm going to put this on TV. I mean, think about all the police shootings that were caught on someone's cell phone and that they did live. Like, we wouldn't even be knowing about this. So that's absolutely an idea that can be used and employed, and for good and for to push the needle on certain things. Here's something that I thought about. Dakota, I think you dropped from our view.
Yeah, I think was.
Me too. My battery was low. I had to get my adapter. But anyway, welcome to the virtual sphere. It seems like it's more juice to be live. So I don't know. My poor computer's supposed to be new even. But one thing that Dakota mentioned was becoming one of those citizen ambassadors, either for the police or the community activists, not activists in the sense of going and marching, but getting involved with these community organizations that help to bridge the gap. Or like what we saw on the Frontline episode of Policing the Police, just volunteering to do that kind of work. You're not going to get paid, but if you care about your community, someone has to do this work. And we're all kind of sitting around like, well, we want things to be better, but then what are we going to do to step forward and make sure that we can get it done? And I like all the other ideas too. So we said community involvement, more community involvement, which could include this last idea, so we can incorporate that. Then more Zoom and virtual sessions, which is what Taylor mentioned. I like that idea too, because again, I mean, and she aptly stated that police aren't going to come into a room full of angry people. They don't want to deal with that kind of hostility, but they might come onto a virtual session and talk about their practices and what they do. And, basically they might provide tips for people to kind of like avoid the not so good law enforcement officers or things of that nature. I know a good friend of mine who's out in the suburb of Dallas, Texas. They have these community relations where they actually invite the community to come in and do like police, not training, but they just have them like police socialization, if you will. And this is important for families with young men to get actively involved with the police in their community. And so this is one of those things that can be done. I like the other thing, to reach out to your political representatives. They do work for the community. I had a situation and I reached out to a local person. It's like below the city council, and it's like the ward leaders in DC where I live. And they were definitely responsive. I sent an email, I called them. Their phone numbers are typically on the city services webpage. And so that's definitely one way to get involved. And I do recommend that people do that as well. And then, of course, as Morgan mentioned so eloquently, social media is ubiquitous, and we can use it for good things, and we can also use it to sort of clap back at people if they are not doing things the way that they should. So I like that. I mean, I really do think that these are viable solutions, and we will include them on the wiki, and then we'll also include them in our journal article that we will be publishing in 2021 about this nice topic. So
I was also going to add one more solution, like if, after like doing all of that,
yes.
Then I would say, be that trailblazer and start your own organization. And that's been done plenty of times of, Black Lives Matter movement and plenty of civil rights organizations, period. And it's not, creating your own social media account, creating your name, creating t-shirts, and then just getting a group of people and going out there and starting your own movement and just getting other people to join you. So
I like
that's also.
That's what I'm talking about. Just get out there and just make it happen. And when you start your own group, you can envision it, that this is what I see the need is, and here's how I'm going to meet that need. And you don't need anyone's permission to do it. That's the thing. Right. In today's society, it's just a matter of again, the universe is waiting for all of us to take that first step. So that's great. You all have been wonderful. This is so great. I'm so glad that we've done this. This is my first time doing a session like this, going live. So I'm so happy and excited. I will continue to do this in other classes. And I thank all of you for your participation, for your insightful thoughts, for sharing your research, and for just participating in this forum. And so again, we will be in touch. And so I'll close without all of you out with saying thank you to all of my scholars in ORGC 538. It has been a wonderful semester and a joy and an honor to work with each of you, and particularly as we explore this salient topic and seek solutions for injustice in our society. So thank you to all of you for joining us tonight, and you all have a good evening, and I hope you have a happy time with your families and friends over the next couple of days, and take good care, and we will be back in touch soon. I will, because we have some more stuff to do to wrap up the semester. But thank you to each of you, and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you. Happy holidays.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.